Johnny Mack, of course, at 4, as we do football at 4 to get ready for Eagles and Falcons, the matchups to look for, and some other news and notes surrounding Eagles-Falcons. Johnny Mack is back. What's going on, my man?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Always good. Hey, the one thing I want to get to before we jump to this game is this Minka Fitzpatrick, you tweeted about it, a lot of people tweeting about it. Is that something, Howie? We always know he makes the call, but does this call make sense?
Well, it doesn't. Yeah, it makes sense for the Eagles. It would make sense for just about any team in this league because that's a really, really talented player. He's 22 years old. I don't think people realize. And he's under contract through 2021. Then you have an option, so he's cost effective, and especially from a team like the Eagles standpoint, worst case scenario, this team's going to be drafting maybe 25, and that's if they're not nearly as good as they think they're going to be. They're going to be at the bottom of the first round. So if you think about the odds of getting a similar type player, similar type prospect with the ceiling that he has, you're not getting it at that point in the draft. You're just not. So to me, we always talk about big names, and fans want every big name, and that's true. They wanted Jadeveon Clowney. They wanted Melvin Gordon. I gave you all the reasons why none of that made sense. This one, it makes sense. It doesn't make sense from the Dolphins standpoint because you don't put players like this on the market, but that's how bad that organization is.
No. So you would be willing to do a first-round pick essentially then to get it? Would the Dolphins be willing to take a first-round, but just a first-round pick?
If I'm the Dolphins, no. I think ultimately they would be willing. It's weird because even if you consider, you and I, Mike, have talked about the tanking and the realization that maybe you have to do it in the NBA. You don't have to do it in the NFL. There are quick turnarounds all the time. So I don't believe in tanking in the NFL to begin with. But even if you stipulate that's the way you want to go, well, this is the exact type of player you want. You want the 22-year-old with the high upside.
Right, that's kind of what I was saying. It's like, what's the demarcation line of guy that you're saying he's a part of what we want to keep building here as opposed to let's start all the way over? Now, I get it. He doesn't want to be there. They might not be all that thrilled about getting rid of him, but if he doesn't want to be there, they might not have a choice.
Yeah, and that's the bigger issue, I think, is the fact that they've alienated to him from people I texted with today from down there. There's a concern from his standpoint. They made him learn 6 different positions. He's got a lot of Malcolm Jenkins in him. As far as the versatility goes, he's a great slot corner. He can play outside, can play either safety, can play nickel linebacker. But Malcolm loves that. He loves the challenge. And evidently he doesn't. He wants to focus on one position and sort of become an all-pro level player. So we always talk about managing personalities. That's what Doug does so well here. It looks like they haven't managed that personality. They don't understand that not everybody's the same. Not everybody's going to embrace learning 6 different positions, and that seems to be a problem from his perspective.
One thing that also gives me pause on whether or not the Eagles would ever get Minka, John, is that if it costs anything close to a first-round pick or more, Howie Roseman has had, 9 drafts as GM of the Eagles, and not one single time has he ever used a first-round pick on a safety. So I wonder if, in his mind, the value matches the player and the position.
Yeah, I think it does. I understand what you're saying, but he can play boundary corner. He was arguably the best slot corner in the NFL last season, and that is becoming a more valued position. So he's more than just a safety. And I kind of look at it, if I'm the Eagles, and I say, he's better than everybody you got at every position. In other words, with the exception of Malcolm Jenkins, he's a better slot corner than Vontae. He's better boundary corner than either Sidney Jones or Rasul Douglas. And he could play the outside better than them as well. He's better than Rodney McLeod. He's certainly better than Andrew Sendeo and Jonathan Cyprien. Malcolm is probably in the same category, but he's aging as well, and there's a lot of tread on that tire. I mean, this is a no-brainer to me. If the Eagles say they don't win the Super Bowl, if they win the Super Bowl, they're picking 32. There's no way they're getting a player like this. Right. None. But even if they lose in the divisional round, even if they have a disastrous season and don't even win the division wild card, one and out, they're still going to be in the 20s. And you're not going to get a player of this caliber. So if the opportunity is there, and this is a rare opportunity, if you can jump, you leap.
Yeah, no doubt. It'll be interesting to see. I wonder in part, I mean, Mike and I were talking about this. You're Miami, you're tanking, you're trying to stockpile a real young, good talent. Why in the world would you want to even get rid of Minka Fitzpatrick? And my response to that was, I don't know that they really do, but if they put him, he requested, they put it out there, and somebody wants to blow the doors off of them with a good offer, well, then you can see them making it happen. But I'm not 100% convinced that he is going to be an ex-Dolphin.
No, I don't think the Dolphins want to trade him at all.
Right.
I think it's one of those situations where he is trying to force his way out. And there is Jeff, how difficult this game is to play from a physical standpoint. Everyone calls it the grind, and it really is a grind for the players. So you can imagine what they go through on good teams to get to a level, and then you got to go through that for a team that's not even trying to win.
Right.
So you can get it from the player perspective in the fact that they don't want to be involved with that nonsense, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy when he's a Patriot, right?
Well, I'll tell you what, the NFL is kind of, I don't want to say moving towards what the NBA's got, but these guys forcing their way out. I got to imagine the NFL doesn't like the potential of that happening and these guys landing on teams that they want to land on.
No, I agree with that. That's a bad trend, and it certainly looks bad. Antonio Brown, that looks terrible. People have their conspiracy theories. I think they're nonsense. It's just a guy saw a way to get out and get to a team he'd rather be on, and he took it, and we'll see how that works out. But, yeah, I mean, that's never good. It isn't. And, I mean, it's got to be really bad because in every other sport, everybody's begging to play in South Florida.
Not Vinny Curry.
In the NFL, yeah, in the NFL, everybody's trying to get away. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. All right. John McMullen, Football at 4 at JF McMullen. Eagles went inside today in preparation for what they'll see on Sunday night. Now, John, the Eagles have played the Falcons 3 times in a row here in Philly. You know, is it as simple as the game's in Philly, the Eagles are better? The game's in Atlanta, the Falcons are better?
I don't know if it's that simple. That's a big part of it. It's much more difficult to play down there, just as it's tremendously difficult to play at Lincoln Financial Field. Ultimately, I think the Eagles are a better team, no matter where the game is played. But I do think, and I mentioned on yesterday's show, I think the spot enters into it. And the fact that the Falcons not only lost week 1, but they lost horrifically, and they played horribly, and it was on the road. This is their home opener. It's a night game. People are going to be jacked up to see the team for the first time. The Falcons don't want to face that 0-2 narrative, so they're going to be fighting and clawing and scratching. So, you know, gamblers will always talk about logical losses on an NFL schedule. And they're really talking about, they're not talking about X's and O's, they're talking about spots. And this is a spot for the Eagles that is really, really difficult. They're not going to go 16-0, so you have to find those logical losses. I think this might be one of them.
John, we just had Vinny Curry on before.
You know, you're talking to an illogical fan base, though. There are no logical
Mike
losses.
loves to point this out. In between, with Vinny, talking about the WWE and rapping some Biggie lyrics for us, we actually talked a little bit about Dirk Cutter, his former head coach last year in Tampa, now being the offensive coordinator for the Falcons. And I think the one thing that has stood out over the past few years in these battles with the Falcons is that we all wind up like ripping Steve Sarkisian in the end and all the running and setting football back 30 years and 2 tight ends kept in and all that. Do you see a whole different approach with a guy like Cutter, who last year put up a lot of points on Jim's defense down in Tampa?
Well, I think it's better. I will say that than Steve Sarkisian. Although Dirk had his own issues, and I don't know if Vinny brought some of them up, but I mean, I look at Julio Jones. If he's not the best receiver in football, he's certainly amongst the top 2 or 3. He's certainly the biggest, strongest, most physical, and dominating receiver, and yet they can't get the football to him in the red zone. It's been a theme. It's the weirdest thing to me. It doesn't make any sense. You have a great quarterback. You have other weapons. There should be opportunities there. They've been working at it for years. They've been really, really explosive if you go back to the Super Bowl year. But there's always been some strange things with that offense. And no matter who, you go back to even Kyle Shanahan in the Super Bowl and the big lead and what they were trying to do there. So I think they've been trying to get it right at offensive coordinator for a long time. And judging by week 1, they haven't gotten it right yet. But I do think ultimately it'll certainly be probably not as good as Shanahan, but better than Sarkisian.
That's a good happy medium. I guess no matter who's presiding over the offense, you have to think that the first thing that they're going to try to do is test that Eagles secondary in particular. You know, I think Julio has great games, you know, no matter who he's going against, but I would think that Ridley is going to be a guy that we're going to be wondering if he's going to go off on whichever corner gets matched up on him.
And yesterday Schwartz was kind of asked about rotating guys, and it sounded like he wants to try to cut that down a little bit. At least that's the impression I got.
Well, what the problem is Ronald Darby, and Ronald's not completely back. The Eagles consider him their number 1 corner. And once he's able to play an entire game, remember, he just ditched the knee brace, which he hated, by the way, a week or 10 days ago. And we talk about ACL and feeling comfortable and all of those things. I think ultimately when he's out there for an entire game, and maybe it'll be this week, he cramped up. You know, I asked Jim specifically about his pitch count. He said it was more the cramps than anything else. So if he can go out there for the entire game, I think then that rotation system is put in the back pocket, and they choose between Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas. You could make a case for both of them, both good and bad. And they both Rasul gave up the long touchdown. Sidney should have given up a long touchdown, but Case Keenum overthrew Terry McLaurin. So it's a weakness right now, that other cornerback spot. And some people will say Ronald's spot because he's not the most physical guy in the world. He's not the best tackler in the world. And some would say the secondary as a whole is a weakness. It certainly was against Washington. There's got to be improvement. And hey, you bring somebody in to improve it.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, on offense, John, you know, Deshaun Jackson had the 2 deep bombs, got off to a great start with Carson Wentz there. In Atlanta, they play that cover 3. Trufant likes to get, in general, they like to get up on you and jam you at scrimmage, that at the cornerback position. That's normally a defense that Deshaun doesn't always perform well against. It almost makes an argument that this might be an interior receivers type of game this weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you can get, especially a physical, bigger corner like Trufant can get his hands on him and disrupt that timing more than anything else. And it's really difficult when you play a lot of cover 3, as Seattle was famous for, and that's where Dan Quinn came from, learned it from Pete Carroll, brought it down there. If you think about the Legion of Boom, they don't have that kind of talent, but that's the similar type of system they put into place. And it's just designed to make you impatient and force you to go the length of the field and take what the defense is giving you. And as we know, quarterbacks in this league, and we've talked about Carson Wentz specifically, his aggressiveness, the hope is you get frustrated, you try to push the ball down the field into coverage, and then the turnovers happened. And back in Seattle was Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman, and so much success that they had playing that type of defense. Now, so many teams, though, play it. It's almost becoming like Cover 2 was back in sort of the Tony Dungy days, where Tampa Bay was so successful, and really before that it was with Denny Green in Minnesota, and then everybody started playing it until everybody figured it out. And I think everybody's starting to figure out single high. So we'll see if the Eagles can figure it out.
Well, John, one spot up front, they struggled mightily in their loss to the Vikings, and their offensive line's all over the place. Lindstrom's out. Jamal Brown's going to be in. They got the rookie at tackle, McGarry, who played half the time last week. Ryan got sacked 4. He was running all over the place. It's why Jones didn't do much. I mean, the Eagles and Jim Schwartz, we know they don't like to blitz. We know they like to get pressure with their guys. Vinny Curry told us that was kind of a message this week, which was, this line can be had. So it seems that the line is a good matchup for this Eagle defense.
Yeah, they're excited about that matchup for the second consecutive week. They were very excited last week as well against Washington for obvious reasons with no Trent Williams. They think they have a big advantage. To me, the most interesting thing is how are they going to handle Malik Jackson's absence? How are they going to use the nickel rush? Are they just going to insert Vinny Curry at left end, put Brandon inside, maybe vice versa?
Now, oddly enough, whether he might be lying to us or didn't want to say, but he said he has not been told whether his role
he's
is
not
expanding.
Been told.
No, right? Do you find that to be odd?
No, I was talking to Ronald Darby, and he said the same thing. He said, I think we get the info the same time you guys get it.
Well, what they do, I mean, John, right? They practice about 500 different scenarios and lineups, and then the coaches all decide on Saturday night over a bunch of cigars and a bunch of sheets of paper of how they're going to go attack, and then they find out.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he's telling the truth. I think he doesn't know. But the Eagles are good at what Jeff just said, situational football, practicing for situational football. So whatever they settle on, they've certainly practiced again and again. And if you're at practice, I'm sure Vinny has got a feeling for what they're going to do. But, he probably hasn't been told yet. I think he's telling the truth there.
John McMullen at JF McMullen, getting you ready for the Eagles and, of course, the Falcons Sunday Night Football. The coverage begins at 5 o'clock from Tolman Jones. Tony Bruno and the crew will be out there. I believe John will be a part of that crew on Sunday. Are you actually going to show at Tolman Jones with Bruno and the crew?
I am scheduled to be there. If I can get past Tollman Joe on the wall with me, I'll be a Tollman Joe.
No, Tollman Jane is at the toll.
The fun starts at 5 to 7 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Merrill and Mike have all the action. So, we talked a lot the last couple of days. They got run all over. The Eagles, don't want to run the ball 40-plus times. Maybe they do it more. But if there is one weakness that you think the Eagles are really excited about, where's that?
I think it is the offensive line. I think they saw what happened in Minnesota, and they already know that one of their strengths is the defensive line. And there's some concern, not only with Malik Jackson, but Fletcher Cox is not right. By the way, that's something I mentioned today. I was watching him, and we basically only get to look at individual drills on Friday. That toe is not completely healthy. He was down in reps. He's coming off the foot surgery. Doug admitted the toe is related to the foot. So I do think there is some concern. But even with all those concerns, I mean, they are excited. They are licking their chops to face this offensive line. The one thing that might help the Falcons, though, is we talked about their lack of success here at Lincoln Financial Field, their lack of success against the Vikings last week. That's all on the road, remember, and really difficult stadiums where you got to use the silent count. They don't have to worry about that at home. and that extra tick might be a big difference.
All right, Johnny Mac, your pick for Sunday night is?
Oh, as I said, bad spot. I'm not. It's not about X's and O's for me. This game, I just think it's a bad spot. It's a logical loss, and I have the Falcons winning 28-24.
28-24 is John McMullen's pick for the game. Sunday Night Football right here on 97.3 ESPN, and the pregame show starts at 5 o'clock with a countdown to kickoff. Tony Bruno, John McMullen, Colin Thompson, and probably anybody else they can find to hand a microphone to, right? Anybody else walking around out
bring Jeff Mosher down.
Oh, we'll try to do that. We'll
I don't
try
know if there's enough room for me now.
All right, John, we will hear you throughout the platforms this weekend, and look for your coverage on 97.3 ESPN.com, and follow him at JF McMullen. Thanks, pal.
All right, thank you, guys.